So, to the criminal justice students at KCC, once again, this is Mark McDougall, your instructor. And today we have the wonderful benefit of talking to Sheriff Kaber. And Sheriff Kaber has been gracious enough to meet with us. We all know that he's quite busy, but today we're here to chat with him and to get some of his viewpoints. But first of all, Sheriff Kaber, for the benefit of the students, and you definitely do not need to go into too much detail, but you were not always the sheriff of Klamath County. Rather, you've had a very full and interesting career path. Could you just outline that shortly for us?
Yeah, well, thanks. And thanks for the opportunity to talk to a group. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. This is kind of unique, but I essentially grew up in Klamath County. Then I worked at a lumber mill and I sold coffee for a while. But in 1987, which is, I'm sure, well before anybody watching this was born, I took my first job in law enforcement with the Oregon State Police. And I was promptly transferred to Northeastern Oregon, where I'd hardly ever been in my life. And my wife and I and 3 kids at that time, we lived up there for a year and a half before we transferred back down to Klamath County in 1990. And that's where I've been ever since. So I finished my career with the state police in 2013. After 26 years, I had tons of different assignments throughout that. So I have experiences in a lot of different areas with them. And then I retired, and I thought I was done with law enforcement, only to, if you'll pardon it, sounds a little silly, but kind of a call back to the position I'm in now. I felt running for the office of sheriff was what I was supposed to do at that time, given the circumstances of things going on. So I decided to become a politician, which it is an elected position. That's why I jokingly call it a politician, but it is a political position in that you're elected to it. So I've been here since 2017, which at this point is just over 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. And for the benefit of the students, when I transferred down to Klamath, you were at that time retired, and then you became sheriff. Mm-hmm. And I had the opportunity to work on a few different occurrences and incidences with you. And I definitely appreciated your leadership and also your previous experiences. How would you compare your job, just briefly? I know you had many different assignments with OSB, and many troopers who have done 25 years plus will have had lots of different experiences. But if you were to just try and boil it down to a succinct aspect, what's the biggest difference between being a police officer and even a supervisor with a police agency versus being an elected official who is the sheriff?
Well, let me just give you maybe a few quick examples. As the sheriff, I'm technically the chief executive law enforcement officer of the county. Therefore, I have a lot of influence has been given to this office in a lot of different areas. So immediately walking into this position, whether you're ready for it or not, you end up being involved in a lot of decisions that affect every single resident of the county when it comes to public safety. Not just in the realm of is the public safe from being a victim of crime, but also in the areas of if a citizen is lost, hurt, injured, missing, you name it, you gain those responsibilities as well. If their quality of life is threatened in some cases by other people's actions, that has to be considered as well. And then overall, one of the main mandates for the sheriff in the statutes even is the keeping of the peace. Now, the keeping of the peace is kind of a broad category that allows you to maybe take some liberties with things, even things like the law or the regulations that a lot of other agencies will follow because they have to answer to boards or bosses or you name it, city councils, let's say. But the sheriff really only answers to the voter. We take an oath of office as a sheriff that basically says that we will keep the peace, that we will uphold the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Oregon, and the laws thereof. And so as you continue on in the criminal justice training sort of thing, those documents will become very important to you. You know, the law, the Constitution of the state, and primarily the United States Constitution. So as you'll see, even in my oath of office, those three things can exist, and there can be problems with them conflicting with each other. Laws can be passed that a person in my position as a sheriff believe are actually unconstitutional. So now I have to make a decision as to which one is supreme in how our deputies are going to go forward on a case. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of that has to do with whether it be Second Amendment rights or First Amendment rights of speech or any other laws that our legislatures in Oregon pass, and seemingly they don't always seem to adhere to constitutional concerns like I've taken an oath to do that.
Yes. Now, generally speaking, these classes that I am teaching lately, if there's a group of 10 students, there's about 3 who are the traditional, they want to become law enforcement officers. Then 3 or 4 of them are interested in doing an offshoot of criminal justice, as in parole and probation, or addiction counseling, mm-hmm. or child welfare, or what have you. And then there's a subsection of about 3 or more out of 10 who just don't quite know what they're interested in yet. They're taking a criminal justice course because they have some interest. They want to know what sort of experiences that they might gain from that, but they're definitely undecided. To that group of undecided 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and granted, also I have non-traditional students in my classes also, but they generally have had a fair amount of life experiences and have a direction that they're intending on going. But those young college students who are still trying to figure out what they want to do in life, what are a few words, and I'll say it, wisdom, because you definitely have earned your right to be declared to have that wisdom in both life and in law enforcement. What would a few suggestions that you would make to that group of young people searching out what they want to do?
Well, I can tell you that I wasn't in my mid-20s or so before I fully realized maybe where I wanted to head. So the wisdom I might have to impart would be, don't get in too much of a hurry. Typically your life is long. A career of even 20, 25 years when you maybe settle on what it is you want to do. Anymore can be disrupted by one thing or another. So getting started on it, you don't need to be in a rush to get started on that. You know, take enough time to consider your strengths and your weaknesses, and go ahead and explore. And I'll talk about law enforcement. Make sure that you do a little bit of exploration on that before you make a full decision to go in. Because once you're into law enforcement, just like anything else, it may turn out to be something a little different than you thought. And so better to take your time before you get in fully. And that can be accomplished with things like taking the criminal justice courses. It can be taking ride-alongs with a deputy or some of the other agencies. You can see firsthand what's going on. Take the time to go sit in on now that courts and things are open again, you take time to go watch a court case or get involved in that. When it comes to the criminal justice system, there are tremendous number of avenues you could go and be very successful and fulfilled in a relationship with your job. And so, and we need all of them, you know. I often tell people, you know, that the life experiences that you get when you're sometimes in your early 20s, depending on what it was before, will benefit you later on. I took a job I really didn't like at one point, and it was a salesman's job. But I found out that I was a pretty quiet person before. I'd only talked to 3 or 4 people a day. I wasn't really prepared to go straight into police work. And then I took a job for a couple of years where I was forced to come out of my shell and actually cold call people or talk to people in restaurants or sell things to people. And that actually helped me come out of my shell and go ahead and develop some skills, at least how to communicate. That alone was maybe one of the most key pieces of being successful in this position, is to be able to communicate with people, have life experiences, and that can include things like being in the military, but it can include things like having children or maintaining a relationship with your family or being part of a church or a social network. I mean, all of those things are good. We don't necessarily need someone that's completely career-minded in one track, like I'm only going to be a police officer, I'm only going to be a this. Our best people are people that have life experiences way beyond that, because you come into contact with people every single day of all varying sorts of circumstances that they're living through, and you need to be able to relate and understand where they're coming from. So
I do really appreciate that you mentioned that sales position. It's something that I have talked to many recruits. I sold shoes before becoming a police officer, and I feel that just that ability to communicate, like you mentioned, is of utmost importance. So here in Klamath County, I and my wife intentionally moved down here because we love Klamath. It has a lot of great things to offer. And so if a potential law enforcement applicant that either lives in Klamath and wants to stay in the area, or potentially moves to the City of Sunshine, as it's pretty well known as, here there are generally 3 law enforcement agencies. There's the City Police Department, there is the State Police, and then there's the Sheriff's Office. And while we have spoken with members of the other agencies, I have the experience, and so do you, of the State Police. And just as a comparison, if someone wanted to stay in wonderful Klamath because they have family members or what have you, their opportunities, and I can attest to this 100%, their opportunities with the State Police here would be fairly minimal, in that in order to promote, in order to work in a different section, there's just not as many employees. It's a relatively small office. And so if we compare that with the Sheriff's Office, and it's something that a lot of the students are somewhat surprised of, is, and you mentioned it, there are many different facets to the Sheriff's Office. And many people don't realize that the Sheriff's Office handles all the civil issues. And you mentioned it a little bit as far as if some of the citizens' well-being is impacted. So the Sheriff's Office handles the civil aspects. And one of your soon-to-retire members of the Sheriff's Office would talk about how sometimes that civil and civil forfeiture aspect is actually pretty interesting, of trying to help civil justice occur. But on top of that, you're in charge of the only jail in all of Klamath County, and Klamath County is a big county. And then in addition to that, you're also juggling search and rescue, you're juggling patrol, and criminal investigations. Do you find
that's part of it?
Please fill in the additional information. What I'm trying to get at is, if and the man or woman would not have to be necessarily young, but if someone came and was hired on by the Klamath County Sheriff's Office, there's a lot of opportunity for them. Wouldn't you agree? As far as potential movement and changing every some odd time frame when maybe the patrol work gets a little tiresome, and then they have the ability to do something else.
Yeah, I would say that one of the benefits, and I see this as a benefit for a sheriff's office, one of our size, and the things that we're involved with is that you should never have a boring day when you come to work here. There is first off, there's plenty of things to do, and there's plenty of variety in those things that need to get done. And in a person's career, they could work in the jail. They could start in the jail. And you can promote up through the jail, and jail administration is, certainly something worth working towards. We have corrections jobs open in the jail right now. We're constantly trying to fill those positions. It's a really good place to start, if nothing else. To become a certified corrections deputy would be an honor to have that sort of certification. That's a job that you could, and also you could use that to move other places. They're widely sought after, but we also and there's a lot of jobs in the jail. Let me just stick with that for a second. Whether it be the corrections deputy themselves that maintains control over the inmates population, but we also have transport deputies. We have medical staff. We have we have to run a kitchen, and so we feed 365 days a year. We have kitchen staff, medical staff, corrections deputies, transport deputies, administrators, court security. We have all kinds of facets just to the jail. On the patrol side, one of the key things that you have to remember here is that we have patrol deputies. Everybody's familiar with the deputy that would answer your call for service or pull you over if they saw a traffic violation or something like that. But a lot of our deputies are in special assignments. So whether the special assignment be in our Marine Division, whether it be a forest patrol, whether it be a school resource officer, those are three right off the bat. We have contracts for all of those positions. We fill those. Our deputies are also given collateral duties. You mentioned search and rescue. Search and rescue is mostly a volunteer group, and it's a great group of people that volunteer for that service, but it doesn't start with them. The original call comes in and there's someone lost, missing, or they're stuck and they need help. That goes to our patrol deputies. So our patrol deputies are all search and rescue deputies. They may take that initial call and go on that. All of our patrol deputies are potentially Marine deputies. If there's an incident on the water, they're likely to be the first one on scene and need to go there. So those things happen. And sometimes we're on top of mountaintops, with our side-by-sides in the snow because a repeater goes down, and we have the vehicles to get technicians up there. And we laugh sometimes that you could come to work thinking you're going to do this, but you may be on a boat in the morning. You may be on the top of,
hammock
or mountain in the afternoon, and that often happens. And then we equip our people to, we have what's essentially an urban police department that we work out of here too. The urban growth boundary of Klamath Falls is no different than the city of Klamath Falls. There's calls for service, people that need help. And so you could be doing basically urban police work, and then you can end up 50 miles out east or north of town doing some other job. So our boots are often dirty. They're often dirty because we're just off the road and we're out in the rural areas doing things at all times. Some of our deputies are assigned to animal control. We run the animal control department too. Emergency management is a sub-department of the sheriff's office, and we have emergency management staff that help us mitigate after fires and floods, and we've had plenty of fires. They're some of the busiest people there were. So that's just kind of a quick overview of pretty much other policing agencies, other criminal justice agencies often have a set parameters of whether it be the city limits or their priorities with the state police, mainly transportation safety, things like that. Well, everything that can't find a home anywhere else comes to the sheriff's office. We catch every call. that can't be handled by somebody else, we get it, and there's no one for us to turn to. We will take it.
24/7, 365, yes.
24/7, 365.
Yes.
The phone rings often when you don't want it to.
Exactly.
But in our sworn positions, we are mandated to try and provide that service at any time, day or night.
Mm-hmm. Do you, in your experience, since you have been elected as sheriff, there are not very many communities where there is a community college that has a criminal justice program that is quite as connected. So at KCC, and many of the students probably know, the sheriff's office has a substation.
Yep.
And has a Sergeant, Shane Mitchell, assigned to that location. And for future classes, that position may change to a different sergeant down the road. But the sheriff's office is very involved in not just in the campus safety, but rather also in the criminal justice program. So there have been classes that I have been the teacher for, where I have gotten a lot of assistance from the sheriff's office in both putting it on, equipment, and everything else. As a sheriff, is that a significant benefit to you and your office, having that connection with a community college that is local?
Yeah, I'm very proud of our relationship with Klamath Community College, and Dr. Gutierrez and I were some of the ones that helped develop that originally and come to an agreement on what that would look like. The college was very proactive in having a safety element to their program, to have a uniformed person around a lot. And so we were logically, being that the community college is in the county's jurisdiction, we'll say, we were the logical agency to go to. Now, when we started that program, we didn't know exactly how it was going to end up. So through a series of discussions, we ended up with the concept of the community college providing a substation, which they wanted, that our sergeant would be assigned to and be there frequently. This all replaced the contract we had with them, which were occasional patrols through the facility, which was really ineffective towards campus safety. So with our partnership, we also agreed to participate in the criminal justice program any way that we could, as often as we could. And the hopes were that it was going to be mutually beneficial, in that there would be some people in the community justice program that might gravitate towards law enforcement work, whether it be with our agency or somewhere else. And we're constantly trying to develop the future, of these responsibilities. It isn't going to be me. It's going to be somebody else in a few years from now, 20 years from now. We need to constantly be looking at that. And so Klamath Community College has a great workforce development attitude, which I completely agree with. That's exactly what needs to happen, whether it be in the fire service or in law enforcement or in all of the other things that KCC does. The workforce development it's a priority for me, and they're doing all that work. So it would be foolish of me not to take advantage of partnering with them any way that we could.
Terrific. In closing, because I know your time is precious, right now we are in a time frame that you and I in our careers, we had never really experienced, where nationally and not so much locally, because this county, just as a side note, when I transferred down here, I felt just so much more of a support from the community for law enforcement.
Yes.
So much more so than when I was working up in the general Portland metropolitan area. And that was a big thing for me, is having that community support. Besides the fact that Klamath County generally really supports law enforcement, what would you say to the young people who are thinking about a career in law enforcement, but because of the current climate throughout the United States or even in the world, perhaps their parents or their friends are trying to talk them out of it because there has been significant societal turmoil to phrase it as aptly as I can, that has made the position of being a law enforcement officer or even being involved in the criminal justice section not, I won't say not as desirable, because I think it still is. Yet the opinions of different folks sway some of the younger students. They may have some concerns, and I try and tell them it's a pendulum and it'll swing back at some point. What would you tell those young students who are maybe on that fence of, my parents are telling me, you shouldn't be a cop now. They're not respected as much. It's potentially more dangerous. What would you tell those students who are concerned that law enforcement has changed and they maybe no longer want to enter it as a career?
Well, I would tell them that I understand the concern. I clearly see the concern that people have, because there has been a shift nationally. Not so much, I agree, in this community, but certainly within the state, there has been a shift in that. But I understand the concern because of it. However, I also believe that there has always been some form of law enforcement or accountability system throughout the world, throughout ancient times, even up until present, and there always will be. Somebody's going to have to do the job of protecting others and taking care of their community, and so we are always going to be here in one form or another. Now, I am glad that you used the word pendulum, because that's often the exact same way I describe it. I've watched the pendulum swing back and forth on several things, and as soon as I think this is going terribly wrong, it seems to right itself for a while, and then whatever the issue is, it seems to shift the other way and go to the extreme. And I think we're seeing that now. I think the pendulum has swung as far as it can go right now on some issues, and I think the only people that don't realize that might be some of our legislatures in the state that are still trying to reform things that are better left alone. And so they're trying to do that, and they've done some of that we're still going to feel the effects of for a while. But eventually, I think shortly, really, we're going to come back to a center that is more comfortable for us until that shifts the other way. And that is just something, whether it be a law enforcement career or maybe every single profession has to live with. That's just the way the world is. We just seem to go too far one way, and then there's a self-correcting, accountability piece that kind of brings it back. So prepare yourself. Life is like that. Things will be going great one day and not so great the next. And I think that is just something that philosophically you have to settle in your own mind, that you need to be the best person you can be, do the best job at what you feel like you're called to do. And hopefully some in this class will consider public safety. And I say public safety because that's where I feel like I live, not just law enforcement. It's public safety. That's a much broader view of maybe the whole issue. Public safety, whether it be through a prosecutor's office or a defense office or a fire service or an ambulance or working in our jail or, there's a lot. The health division, or public health, our water, environmental safety, all of those things are important. And I think they're always going to be here. So if you're in this class and you're here because you're thinking that this might be something you want to do, I want to thank you for that, because as I become an older and older man, I'm going to need people to step up and fill the shoes of some of the people that I've worked with and my friends that we're kind of aging out. There's always going to be a need. So you younger, there's a lot of satisfaction you will get by being in a public safety position.
I wholeheartedly agree. Sheriff, thank you very much.